Good day, everyone. Welcome in today's virtual roundtable, key steps to developing a mobile strategy for your lab. My name is Celia Gessler, and I will moderate the session. After a 40-minute discussion with our panelists, we will run a 15-minute Q&A, so please submit your question anytime to the question box. You can find this question box here on your bar at the bottom of the window. And you can also download more materials from our source panel by clicking on the download button on this navigating bar. This roundtable is hosted by LabTwin, who is developing the world's first voice and AI-powered digital lab assistant, enabling smart data capture and access directly at the bench. LabTwin is used already in 7 of the top 20 pharmas, helping them to building the lab of the future. And the topic of the day is mobile strategy. Indeed, mobile technology is the fastest growing technology of all time and has been widely adopted by companies to increase their productivity. The healthcare sector, for example, has been revolutionized by the development of mobile health app, being the core interface between patients and healthcare practitioners. In preclinical R&D lab, on the path to their digital transformation, they are willing to implement mobile technology to facilitate scientist documentation at the bench and interact with lab devices and software. However, establishing a successful strategy to implement a new technology in a lab can sometimes be hazardous, and it is better to be prepared with some specific challenges that are often overlooked. So that's why today we have a fantastic panel that I will present here. We are delighted to host Arkadiusz, David, Daniel, and Denis. Ark is Principal Digital Technology Engineer at Novartis and has years of expertise in implementing new technologies for scientists. David is a scientist from background and is now using his knowledge of the lab to bring adequate informatic initiatives as head of Smart Lab at UCB Pharma. Daniel is head of lab and research IT at Wega Informatik, but also CTO at the SciLi Consortium and develops IT systems to optimize QC laboratories. Denis has a PhD in mechatronic design and worked as a project director on integrative production technology at BCG before taking in charge customer success at LabTwin. You can find more and read their full short biography in the presenters box at the bottom of the platform. But let's kick off now with, first of all, why does anyone would want to implement mobile technologies? So Denis, you're working with pharma companies to bring mobile in their labs. What are the main advantages for them?
Yeah, to me, mobile technology is mainly an enabler of many other things. So remember those times you could order a pizza over your laptop computer, but nobody did so, right? Only with a smartphone, this becomes feasible, this becomes usable, and that also holds for many things in the lab. And with the mobile, you have the information at your fingertips, and to me, this is like having an assistant next to you, and you can ask the assistant different tasks to do. The assistant can take notes for you, like you are doing science in the lab, and you always have somebody to support your science. And overall, I think it's 4+1 things where mobile can be really helpful for people in the labs. The first one is about documentation in real time. You have a deviation from an SOP and you want to record that deviation. So instead of writing everything down on a paper and at the end of the day typing it into the computer, directly digitalize it. And I think that's what we understand here under real-time documentation. The second point is everything that has to do with access, and we have it here as access directly at the bench. I observed a lot of people who need to walk back to their office just to get a printout of their protocol before they execute it. And if you have the things that you need, the information that you need at your fingertips, you save little time, but often you save little time, and this then makes a lot of time in the end. Number 3 of mobile technology is communication. I've talked to a lot of scientists, and they use oftentimes their personal phones. They have WhatsApp groups, they share pictures. Hey, do you know how to interpret that result? To exchange information within the lab group and to facilitate communication. And the last point, and we have it here kind of in remote monitoring. It's monitoring and execution, I would call it. And I think here we are just at the beginning. I talked to a chemist recently who said, how cool would it be if I'm in the bus and while I'm going to work to the bus, I can already program the roboter to mix the reagents for me, and when then I go finally into the lab, the bubbles all settle down, and I don't have to wait 30 minutes anymore. So this execution thing has a lot of potential, but also here that probably is the most difficult one to solve from a safety perspective. I said 4 plus 1. The plus 1 is for me the indirect benefits. And if you document in real time, if you capture data in real time, not only the scientist herself has benefits, but also the rest of the company. If you have the process that you have paper and at the end of the day you type it in, you don't have any event information, what is really happening in the lab. Only if you are documenting in real time and you are following the steps, you have a digital shadow, so to say, of the process. And that digital shadow can then, as the next step, be used to learn, to standardize, to understand the processes, to get realistic times, how long steps change, and to get a feedback from the real data of the lab to the data analytics team, for example. So in a nutshell, mobile is an enabler technology for lots of other things that you have nicely put here on that slide.
It seems like it's a lot of different options, but I think real-time maybe is the main motivation that brings people towards mobile technology. David, you've been trying mobile technology for real-time documentation in your lab, is that right?
Yes, we are piloting real-time documentation on tablets by revamping our ELN. 2 ways of working. We have an electronic lab notebook. It's with mobile PCs in the lab. It works. Yes, today we are trying to get it really to mobile applications. And then, of course, the way we enter data, if we can do that to natural language speaking or something, it would even enhance things. The driver for this is, yes, people. We asked at that point for the GMP analysis from data integrity point of view to do real-time documentation. But in the company where I work, all the non-GMP work is almost but at the same level. So it's something that becomes more and more important. Real-time, okay, when was it recorded? By who was it recorded? Of course, with all the context behind.
Great. Sounds exciting. And does anyone have a use case example to share, for example, to make it a bit more concrete for our audience? Maybe Arek?
Yes, I can add something from my experience. And I see why the mobile technology has been implemented over the years. In the last couple of years, they've been putting much attention to changing how we work in the lab, how the scientists work in the lab, because I've seen how the lab has been changing, moving to the new modern lab environment. You have different zones and segregation, so it's you need to be agency compliant, and you cannot just bring your smartphone or lab computer or office computer to the labs. You need to have strict segregation. That's why mobile devices, technologies can bring much benefits to the scientists. So recently, I've been involved for many implementation of the tablet devices for years, but recently we worked with the chemist and that they moved to the new building, and the purification lab it's located in different part of the floor. So in order to give them the access to instrument controlling, they don't need to just move from the office or move from the lab bench to the different zones to the purification lab. We provided a device that they can access the ECTA machine purification machine, that they can change the parameters, see the status of the experiment, and see if how much time they have still left. The next step probably will be to provide the device that can use it at home. So the new situation that some scientists start working from home, start making the experiment at work and in the lab, and then moving and going back home when they can finish and then create a report, provided access to the instruments or to the data when they're working from home. So enable the devices and application that they can access the VPN, and they can control instruments remotely, not only within the company but outside wherever they are. So this is couple examples from my experience, from my work.
Yeah, and indeed, I guess this is an appropriated one for the current circumstance of remote working. I'm sure that IoT will become more and more a requisite for integrating mobile technology in the lab and allowing users to directly control the lab from home.
Exactly.
So I'm convinced, let's say now I want to implement mobile technology in my lab. What should I think about from the beginning? What are the challenges that I can prepare? How can I overcome them? Here is some key factors to consider when adopting mobile technology, and I think we can run through them and discuss them. So we were mentioning IoT and integration requirement. This is also challenging. Daniel, do you want to build on that?
Sure, I can do that. We've been hearing a lot now about mobile technology, about the things being connected. I believe, and this is also what I've seen in my experience of like more than 20 years of automating labs, that connectivity is a very important thing, and connectivity can be established by actually basing on proper standards. And with the CELA 2 standard, there is actually a communication standard, which is available for now 1 or 2 years, which has a growing community and growing acceptance. And I believe all these things that we see on this slide, and also that we have heard previously, really relies on having proper connectivity standards. And once you basically have these connectivity standards, so once you're actually able to establish communication between the different services, instruments, systems, etc., then you start actually exchanging data. And so you come into another area, and so you also need to have proper data standards. So you need to think about FAIR principles. So you know, probably all have heard about FAIR, findable, and interoperable, reusable, and attributable data. So that's very important. And also with, for instance, with AnyML, the Analytical Instrument Markup Language, there is a standard which has been around for a while, which has a growing community, a big community. And so if you have this as a foundation, you can build architectures on top of that, that build on things like mobile technologies, etc. And then in the end, and this is probably also an issue or a reason for why maybe people in a lab usually don't ask for standards at the first place. Well-functioning standards you just don't see, right? You will probably not buy a Bluetooth headset because of Bluetooth, but you buy a headset because you want to have that wireless fidelity and you want to be able to move around. And of course, there is luckily the Bluetooth standard, but you probably don't even know the standard. You probably don't even understand the standard. You definitely haven't read the standard. And that's why these standards are very intangible, but I think they are a very important basis. And in the end, maybe to conclude, you should work with vendors. If you're a user in a lab, you want to digitalize, you should work with vendors that support standards, this is just a very good foundation for the future and for this type of project.
Indeed, I guess this is the hidden work somehow of all the informatic experts in the lab to build this first layer of data standardization. And I guess depending on which system you have in your architecture, that will also define the device type. Am I right? Maybe Arek, you have something to say about this?
Yes, correct. I mean, just to add to what Daniel has said, I mean, the standards are important, and the user has tendency to not see it, and they're thinking that everything what we see on the market, especially in the mobile area, right now the mobility it's increased over the years. Everyone has a smartphone. Everyone thinks that we can adopt this kind of technology very easily without looking at our infrastructure and our standard and data in the lab, which lab environment is quite, let's say, archaic a little bit, still like a couple of years behind when you look at how the technology has been developed for the consumer market. So definitely we need to consider how our infrastructure looks like, what kind of connectivity we're allowed, what kind of devices we can get on board on our network, because we need to stay compliant. So it's not only to capture the data and the proper data tools, but we need to look how we can be compliant in order for the security and for example agency rules that we have in place in the lab. So it's we need to look at the various spectrums and see whether this device can be compatible, can be easy adopt, integrate in our environment or we need to do some investments in order to for example Android devices that it's not standard in our company, and instrument vendor offers this one as an additional to control to connect to the instrument remotely. We need to see how we can easily implement this one, and maybe looking at different areas, for example, different application and different way to use this application on the other devices like Windows devices or so on. So we look at the application. What we look in, it's maybe it can be a little bit optimized for to work on different types of devices. So it's not necessarily it's Android and iOS and other type of OS systems, but it might be that we put in much attention for developing our web application that they can work on any type of devices, whether it's personalized and whether it's shared devices.
I can actually just run a quick poll to our audience to see if they have an operating system that is the best for their own lab. So I'm gonna ask them a poll question right now, and if they prefer iOS, Android, or Windows. And once I gather all the result, we could scan through it. So what do you expect would be the result?
Difficult question. Depends who's our audience. If it's more on the management side, I suppose it will be iOS. If it's more on the lab and informatics side, I guess it's more on the Android side.
I think at the end for the user, it doesn't matter which type application they're using. It needs to be intuitive, needs to be user friendly, and it needs to work fast. So it doesn't matter which operation system we are using. It's about how it's going to be integrated, implemented into the core of the system.
I would totally agree to what you just said, Arek. I think it's more today anyway. You will probably implement it as like a web application type, so the OS anyway doesn't matter in the end.
So it's interesting. I have clear winners there. So I'm gonna push the result here. So we have 60% for Windows and 20% for Android and 20% for iOS. So maybe you foresaw it, Arek, because it's Windows winner, at least here among our audience.
It's the most common used system, and I think all the companies and the infrastructure is allowed to integrate the devices on a Windows base. So, however, we've seen the challenges, especially for the tablet devices, because let's say the image we are using is focused on more like let's say office devices or not mobile device or with the touchscreen integration. So that could be the challenge. So I see that it could be, there is still so much work to do in order to optimize the application and to run on the mobile device or the touch-enabled devices. That could be a next step for optimizing the application or the user-friendly interface.
Okay, so there's a lot to think about on the technical point of view. I think there's also a human point of view in implementing the mobile technology. By that, I mean establishing success criteria or dealing with change management. David, do you have some experience there?
Yes, good question. Yes, change management, of course, it's an important aspect of it. First, okay, there is in this mobile strategy or in a more digital strategy, there is another way of working. It's more first is knowing the process, having the data standards behind, and then what is important. Yes, it is in a mobile. What you can say, it's more like it's not an experience, but it's also for my private life. If you're not able to use Siri, for example, to do voice connection with your iPhone or your mobile device, yeah, then this is real change. So one hand side is a change, yes, to use these mobile devices in the lab to consult the data, to also not get lost, but voice control, it's also a different way of interacting. So yes, it all changes, and yeah, we try to bring them step by step. Does that answer your question? Maybe someone else has some better examples on change management.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe I can share some experience from implementing voice in labs. So I learned that it's super important to define clear success criteria, especially if you deal with very new technologies like augmented reality or voice in the lab. And I experienced that many companies just say, okay, let's check it out and ask the users a bit. It gets much more focused if there is a clear goal picture. For example, we have one company who says, yeah, we expect to save each scientist 30 minutes each week. And then you have a clear goal and we have something to measure against. And I very much like that approach because it makes the progress transparent for everybody who's involved here. And we usually then evolve those success criteria around, is the whole thing feasible from a technical point of view, from an integration point of view? Does it provide the value? For example, the time saving, and do the users like it? Is it desirable? And we look into how often they use it, survey responses, get feedback from the lab. To evaluate the experience of the new technology.
Yeah. I think that that's important. That's if we implement such things, all the arguments you mentioned there, we try to bring a storyline, and then it's really the user that needs to bring this storyline. What is going to change for the user? Why is it going to change? What's the advantage? And then we each time think the specific person working in that lab or in that area has to explain it to the other people of its group, and that's we assume as a kind of a change management. We try to discuss it upfront, that people get well aware what is going to change and why do we try to change it. We also work with success criteria. We also try to explain if we do a pilot, by default it's not a success. It's more like lab people can decide as well whether we implement or not. Of course, they have to do the barrier of the change, of course. For example, today we are setting, people should define recipes upfront, whether flexible, non-flexible, structured. That's a major change. We can just not say they can influence the way we do it when you want more flexibility. Of course, the concept needs to stay somewhere.
And so do you select the users that will test this pilot, or do you just select one use cases and then you onboard all the person that are in the lab dealing with this use case in particular?
So we have two kind of initiatives. So some are okay. So go ahead, Sam.
No, you
Go
can,
ahead.
you can
Go ahead,
continue. I
go
can
ahead,
add
go ahead,
to it. Okay, so
Go
just from
ahead.
my experience, we always try to choose the lab champions within the groups when we start in the pilot. So then we can we have high level of success, or we can predict high level of success because those lab champions, they are working, they're already embedded in the lab, and they know the environment, they know the techniques, they know the workflow, and they know the other users. They can later they can explain the different technologies easier than IT come in and then just bring in the device technology and decide you should use it, or we think it might be useful for you. However, we think that from inside we can get to someone who can be the evangelize of the technology. I can explain it better to those who are not that technology oriented, or they're still using old techniques. So that's from my experience. But you guys can continue on this or add something to it.
David, do you have
We try to select both. Yeah, we try to select people that really like technology, combine them in a second phase, but very short after the most difficult people to convince, because if you can get them convinced, then these are the best people to explain to others, because that's kind of an experience. If you and it's always very good people. It's very difficult to convince them. You get a lot of questions, but most of these questions are also valuable for then later on explaining it to the broader audience.
So lab champions exists. That's good to know.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point with the lab champions. And to my experience, it works best if you select a limited number of use cases and you make them work really well, because then you have the opportunity to develop those lab champions because you solved one problem completely, instead of like having lots of people and lots of different teams, lots of different use cases trying it out, and then you get a lot of requirements and it's difficult to deal with all of them and to make them happy. But I rather made better experience with focusing first on a limited number of people from selected teams, from selected use cases, and to work with them to make them champion them as people, but also to make that a champion use case.
Great. So it sounds like now we have a good complete recipe. So we should identify one or two use cases, select the lab champion, choose our favorite device type, establish some success criteria, handle change management also during the process, having a preparation layer to integrate our mobile technology with the different devices required, and of course we need to have the budget for it. So did I forget anything here? Anything to add? Otherwise I will go on.
Yeah, maybe one thing that comes into my mind, and I would also be interested in how the other panelists are handling that, and that is onboarding the people. And personally, I made the experience that onboarding is crucial. The more complex the technology is, the more you need to care about onboarding. But not only onboard the participants, the users, but also like other stakeholders, like from the Workers' Council, for example, to explain the technology to them, to get them on board, to see is there like any roadblockers coming up in future, to think early about that in the onboarding process.
That's because Denis takes his role of customer success very seriously. And that's also part of the success of the implementation, of course. So if you have any more questions on this part, please send it to them and we will reply at the end of the session. Let's move now to the second part. So we've been talking already a bit about integration, but how would mobile integrate with the infrastructure on like which infrastructure should be the favorite one to integrate with? What should be the role of mobile technology? Should we integrate with everything? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? I know there is different type of software used in the lab, some LIMS systems, some ELN, different database, some research, some analytics software to also analyze your data. So should we start with something in particular, how mobile should position itself in between all these softwares? Arek, do you want to start?
Yes. I think so. There are two different perspectives how you should start. Whether start big or you implement all kind of system into the device or the mobile device, or we should start small and then see how we're going to expand in the future and what kind of additional feature can be built on top of it. So then, at first, we need to answer yourself the question: what we need the mobile devices for? Is it only to capture data, only for getting access to your protocols, or we need a device to create an analytical with running analytical software and then see how we can process and create a report form. I think the mobile devices, it's more like a companion devices for the lab. So something that it's never going to replace your office computer or your lab machine that you're using for creating a report or a further analytics. So we should, my opinion, we should start a little bit small and see what integrating and definitely ELN systems that is companion for all the scientists to capturing the notes or making a little bit adjustment to the protocol and see what next steps could be in order to process with the experiments. So this could be my vision how what kind of system, what kind of technology can be used on the mobile devices.
Great. And another important thing that takes place also in the lab right now is the automation system. And should mobile be integrated? How would we imagine this integration to happen? Do we have to take this in account also when we want to implement mobile in the lab? Daniel, you have experience with automatization of lab workflow. What would be your take on it?
Mm-hmm. I can just echo some of the things that have just been mentioned. I think it's really, you have to look at your use case first, whether you are in an unregulated, more research lab, or whether you are in a regulated GXP, QC lab. And maybe if you especially focus on the QC lab, I think mobile devices integrated in the right way can really be a big benefit in these routine and analytics labs, for instance. Just think about like compliance topics. Data integrity issues have actually the work that you've done, have it documented. So if you just go to a balance and weigh something on the balance, it's just, I think, of utmost important that these things are recorded and annotated with the metadata. And just think about if you carry basically your personal mobile and maybe use the personal mobile also to identify yourself at the instrument or at the device or do this type of combinations, you have a nice possibility to directly collect this metadata. And I always bring that example. If you have, for instance, if you have just a weight value, it doesn't help you if you don't have the sample context and the user context and everything. And applying mobile devices in the right way can really be a benefit if you think about it from a user perspective. At the beginning, that's very, very important, because just saying, okay, let's use mobile devices and let's introduce tablets, maybe it's not a good idea for everything, right? And maybe it's not handy because you have your hands full already with things in the lab, etc. So you have to think about a holistic approach, right? And we have been just before speaking a bit about change management or maybe also organizational change, bringing things into people's mind. This is another topic, but I think it's really important that you have a holistic view, but then applying and integrating with mobile technologies can be a huge benefit to end users in the lab.
Yeah, it sounds great. It's indeed the main thing we have to keep in mind is that we want a use case. We want to understand first what do we want from these mobiles, and adding all the context and metadata to any data input. I think it's really what the mobile can do the best. David, anything to add on this?
Yes, well, of course, I think it was said before, there is one part, it's data capture, and there it's different whether it's in a highly regulated environment or not. In the regulated environment, for our labs, we stay there as close as possible to the to softwares that deliver this. On the analytics, of course, it's different. They are okay by default. These are web-based, so this can be on mobile or not. And we have a project setting up an integration layer where we integrate the different systems from you working at UCB, also different lab systems, different instruments, and from there we also see we could interact with the mobile devices, building custom applications. So yeah, pretty much aligned, I think.
Great. So I will also ask the audience again if they have a favorite integration that they would like to see at the first integration in a mobile. If it would be the LIMS, the MS, ELN, ERP, Outlook. Also, sometimes we heard this, Analytics, or any other also software that they use in the lab. So what would you think in this list would be the big winner? So results are coming. Interesting. It's quite shared. So Denis, you've heard of different software integration. Which one would you expect would be the winner?
Oh, that's a difficult guess. Yeah, I don't dare to make a guess.
Well, I must say,
Can only be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the results also look very distributed. So let's say ELN is our big winner with 33%. But then we also have the LIMS and the MS that have a big portion, and then ERP analytics a bit more reduced. So it's a bit distributed, but ELN seems to be still the main ask. And so let's move now to our final part of this presentation. So now I have a pretty clear idea of what I need to take into account in the mobile strategy. So do you have any success story to share or currently deployed strategy for mobile use cases? Or any?
Yeah. Sorry, I can share a little bit. Maybe not fully successful, but partial. I think everyone can take the lessons learned from it. We have recently 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we started the mobile topic was big, and we started deploying the devices, tablet in the lab, and we find out after a couple of years that 60-70% of the tablets haven't been used at all for months. So it turns out that those scientists who really adopted it, they've been using daily. The others, they still continue the work as they used to do in the past. And there was different outcome you can take it from it. So first of all, we need to identify the user and how they're going to work with the devices. So at the first we thought that devices can be used as a personal line, which is fine because everyone would like to have a personal device. However, at that point, we couldn't get ELN on the device, so we couldn't get the favorite software application. We didn't have the connection to the instruments that can control it from the mobile devices, so it didn't work at this point. So mainly the user who adopted the devices, they use it as a note capturing devices. So they like the the touchscreen. They like the drawing on it. They get rid of the paper and pen. However, not everyone could do it. Just to mention that if you think about the mobile device in the lab, we always need to think about how we can work with the vendors who providing the device, and as well as the accessories, the peripheral. So there's always we have lots of consumer devices that can bring it, but adopt it in the lab, it's quite difficult. So we always need to stay the agency compliance with what we bring in the lab in terms of how we can decontaminate those devices and so on. So over the years, we learned that we need to establish good connection with our vendors. So we have lots of discussion with the vendors who producing the protective cases for the devices. The protective case can be used in the in vivo labs. That can be used on the normal lab bench and so on. So this is very important because it's not only devices to bring it to the lab, but to stay compliant and to make sure that those devices can be used across the areas wherever they are going to be used. Normal bench IT doesn't require lots of attention. However, if you work in the in vivo lab, that we need to stay compliant and we need to make sure that the devices are coming and that we are fully protected. So
yeah, that's true that the protective case should help also to integrate mobile in the lab. Or Denis, also you've been implementing voice with mobile so that there is a bit less this problem of having to touch the mobile in the lab. Do you have any story there to share?
Yeah, what makes me happy if I feel that we can really help people. And one of the areas where we can help most is where the employees need to note down different parameters, temperature, cell counts, or humidity measurements. And today they have two choices. Either they stop their experiment, deglove, go to the computer at the other end of the office, open Excel, type it in, go back to their experiment, and have a lot of interruptions in that process. Or they try to keep it in their head, but as we have already mentioned, this doesn't really align with data integrity in terms of Alcoa and contemporaneous documenting. And in a use case that we implemented, the person can say temperature 37.4 degrees, and it gets directly translated into a table. And at the end of the day, the employee has all the data in an Excel sheet and doesn't have to retype anything and is sure that it's the right values because he captured them right when he was doing those work. So it saves the person time because he doesn't have to retype anything. And also it improves data integrity because you can document more contemporaneously.
Okay, so thanks for sharing this. So then when, I guess, users are seeing the value, they adopt the mobile technology much faster in the lab. Any other example of mobile use cases or successful strategy? David, do you have any experience?
We have, as in the bio plant, we implemented a mobile application. We called it Boost because when you sample something, it gives the location and so on. Yes, on the level of contamination management and so on, this really was helping. Secondly, what I can say is we also, when we implemented the ELN, we also implemented mobile tablets in the lab initially. Okay, non-personal devices. We in the first phase we just mentioned them, put them in the balance rooms next to the balance because that was the process, the only equipment at that stage that were connected. They were needed, but step by step people will really start using them for the experiments, and gradually year by year we had to add more of them. I think now 70% of population is really doing real-time capture in these ELN. This is mobile device, but of course it's not a mobile application. So this is then the next step because yes, that's the next request we get. Could it help us more or guide it more to that work? Of course, this is more for the execution part. There is another part where we have more flexibility. Also looking how we can improve there the mobility. So, but yes, I think that's quite a success story on the application of mobiles.
Yes, I mean, it's a fast transition in the labs, and we've seen new technology arriving one after another. So I think it's only the beginning for mobile technology.
Yeah, I think the most satisfying thing is if you see that the people don't use the old system anymore and don't miss the old system anymore. And I just remember talking to one scientist who said, "Okay, I haven't typed into the ELN for 2 weeks, and these are then the feedback when I get that. That makes me really happy because it gives me the knowledge that the new way of working works."
Great.
Yeah, I can see that. Sorry, just to add, I can see that hands-free mobile technology they're coming right now, and they can be a game changer. So like voice assistant, personal assistant, or AR technology visualization. We've done a lot of experiments in order with HoloLens and other technology that you can use it, especially with the area when you not allowed to use a tablet, or your hands are full with pipettes on other tools that you need to use in the lab. So hands-free technology, or using personal assistant, or visualization holograms, that could be next steps in implementing the mobile technology in the lab.
Great. So because we are now reaching this last slides, I will just ask you fast to give me a small sentence on how do you see, what is your vision for this, the place of mobile technology in the lab of the future, the best case scenario, what would be in the dream picture? So Daniel, do you want to start?
I can do that. I believe it must really be seen from a user perspective, and so the mobile technology should be applied in a way so that the users actually benefit in their day-to-day work, and it's not actually a hindrance. And I mean, I've seen some of POCs with HoloLens and glasses and whatever kind of things that are more of a hindrance, but it must really be integrated very good or very well into a lab workflow. And this is probably a combination of different things like voice and mobile, and especially I believe I mentioned that before, for the user in a lab, it's extremely important that the whole system is context aware. So depending where you are with your mobile, at the very place you are, you should be informed about what you have to maybe to do, or it should immediately sense the device, or the analytical instrument that is close to your mobile, and you should actually then directly be connected to it and be able to use it, etc. There's many different aspects, and I think definitely this is the vision of the modern digitalized lab. But as I said also initially, the whole standardization stuff must be first, and this is yet to come. But I believe then it will be actually a great future, and probably there will be use cases we're not even think of now. Anyone
want to build on that?
I think in the beginning of the meeting, I don't know who mentioned it, it was the digital shadow, and I think that's what we are aiming for, something that's following you device from device, guiding you through your process to be done. We've discussed about standardization on the data formats, connectivity on the one side. There is also a lot to do on standardization of the processes. Standardization for me, it doesn't means it cannot be flexible. Both are feasible, but it also needs some reflection. Third thing is as well, okay, if apart from that, you can also question things. Okay, where could I find this instrument? Where could I find this solvent? Is this solvent still available? Or whatever, even safety assessments. If we are using this and this solvents, okay, is there a safety risk? Yes or no? All these things, all the questions you raise yourself and the process, if you could have that shadow behind, that would be a dream, I would think.
Yeah, that sounds good. Arek, anything to add?
I would a little bit go toward the future. So definitely there will be combination of all kind of technology that we're seeing right now. But I'll give you one example that always hear already for years that why couldn't you have such an assistant like Iron Man has, like Jarvis, that can do everything for you. So you can see it, you can have a visualization on certain processes or environment conditions. For example, like I've heard lately, if you can implement something on the fume hood, that you can see your protocols directly projected on the glass, for example. Or then you have a personal assistant that can guide you through all the processes, but you can interact directly with it. It's not only personal assistant that you can capture the data, but it had access to all the resources and databases within your organization, and even can book a table for you for the lunch with your colleagues, for example. So it's a really something that it's integrated and embedded in your personal schedule, personal device, but it's really guide you through all the processes for the lab and outside it. So a little bit story of the future. I've heard that we have lots of component and single components, but if you can bring everything together that works simultaneously in one place, one device, or one technology, that would be great. But let's focus right now on something individual and see how we can integrate everything together in the future. But it could be a couple of years from now, I guess.
Sounds good. And because we're running a tiny bit behind our schedule, Denis, I would like to have your last word, and you can directly also build on LabTwin, please.
So I remember when I started studying, there was this vision of computer integrated manufacturing and the computer integrated lab, meaning that you have a lab without people. Everything is automated. And it didn't work, right? It was a bit of a catastrophe. And we now know that you cannot live without the humans in the lab or in manufacturing. And this means we need to bring technology and humans closer together. And with ELN and LIMS, there's actually a very hard border between the digital world and the people. And to me, mobile is a way of bringing them much closer together and to facilitate that interaction between the digital and the human. And this still evolves. This can be by voice, this can be by augmented reality. And that is, for me, the most important things about the future. It's not so much the artificial intelligence, but really to bring the artificial intelligence and the human intelligence together. And that's also why I like to work with voice and why I believe in the voice assistant, because that's one mode of interaction that is important in the lab and that can facilitate working together, man and machine.
That sounds good. I want to see this dream during my lifetime, I hope. So I will open the floor now for questions. Please send your questions in the Ask a Question box, and we'll try to answer many of them as much as we can in the last 7 minutes. Let's start with first one. Is it better to rent mobile devices or to invest in company phones? Who wants to answer this one?
I don't see if I correctly invest in mobile devices or company phones. So we have program on bring your own mobile. So we are allowed to user to get the corporate application on the private mobile devices. However, I wouldn't go that far to allow the use personal devices in the lab. So that's definitely needs to be a device that it's as I mentioned before, it needs to be compliant, and I think it needs to stay in the lab. It's very difficult to even run the disinfection process every day after you finish your work. So company phone, yes, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Anyone has something to add on this one? Otherwise, I move to the next one. Are mobile devices and robots coexisting in the lab of the future? I guess this one maybe is for Daniel.
Can you just, sorry, acoustically, just didn't get the question. The last bit was disrupted. Can you repeat
Are
that,
mobile
Celia,
devices
please?
and robots coexisting in the lab of the future?
Yeah, I believe so. But I also believe that robotic devices will not be like the lab robots or high throughput screening things that you maybe have seen in the past, but it will probably be mobile robots that actually move around and operate standard laboratory hardware. I believe that this is going to be the future. And as I said before, it's again hand in hand working of the different like technologies together. I think that will be the lab of the future. There's actually a few nice use cases and showcases that are around already at pharma companies that you can actually go and watch. One is explicitly nice. One is, I think, in Port Sunlight at Unilever, and together with Unilever, a very nice use case. And Roche in Basel also had one with mobile robots combined with like mobile devices, etc. That's very nice to maybe go there and see that and get inspired.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And robotics is evolving, and with collaborative robotics, you don't need the light fence anymore, and you can actually operate them in the brown field, and that is definitely a complete game changer. Thanks for sharing these examples.
So I have a question for you, Denis, about LabTwin actually. How does LabTwin to ELN transfer work? Are there any particular ELN platforms that work better than others with this type of technology?
So, yeah, we were talking about data standards, and also LabTwin has a RESTful API, so that basically you can connect every ELN to LabTwin, and we integrated with a couple of ELNs that way, meaning pushing reports and tables into the ELN so that they can then be stored for a long time. And if you are interested, I can share some of these specifics examples after the session.
Good. I have also another technical questions. What is the preferred size of devices, smartphone versus tablets?
It's a very one.
There's no one. It's we've been implemented. I mean, definitely not the size of the laptop, so it's not considered any mobile device. But we've seen some laptops with the 12, 13 inch size. But I think the most used optimized device size is like between 8 to 10 inch size. However, lately I've heard so it depends how we consider the mobile device, or whether it's only a companion device that gives you information, or you can use the voice assistant on it, or you can just capture the voice notes and so on, or you want to use it for writing your protocols or writing into the table when you're doing your experiment. So it's still not one size fits all, but I think there is a variety of choices. So I think right now the mobile technology has been developed or very rapidly, and depends of the user preferences and the use cases we identify.
Good. So it depends. I have another technical question maybe for you, Denis. What challenges do voice recognition issues, particularly with accent, pose from a data integrity point of view?
Yeah, this is a good question. And one aspect of data integrity is accuracy, and maybe even the most important ones. And that's why we put lots of emphasis on accuracy. So if you benchmark LabTwin against other services, speech to text, LabTwin is specifically trained on scientific vocabulary, so it will perform much better. Still, 100% is not possible. And this is why there needs to be an immediate feedback loop between the person and the voice input, so that like you can use voice like the keyboard of your computer, and if you mistype a key, then you will correct it, and in the same way you will correct that input by voice, so that you confirm the input from, and then the tablet works better in that case, that you confirm the input right after your speech then said, yeah, basically that's it, and then you assure you are not only contemporaneous, but you are also accurate.
Perfect. So now we have unfortunately to stop the session. It's the time. Thank you everyone for all your questions that you sent, and we will try to reply to the remaining ones. Thank you very much to all our panelists for their great discussion today, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great session.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, guys.